Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my lecture. So in our last lecture we introduced Coase theorem in context of how to address externalities. So externalities could be positive or negative, we already discussed, and in the definitions and the assumptions and the proposition in the Coase theorem we discussed about two conditions. One is the main argument is internalize the externality, and how it should be internalization either through private or through government interventions. So and then second point, when Coase theorem emphasize is like define property right quite well, so that market can give some sort of amicable solutions over resources, so that economy can get optimal level of output and the price both. So in our last lecture we also discussed like it is not everything that what Coase suggested is like everything you have to put it on the market. Of course not. It is basically market will facilitate, but then property right really needs to be well defined, and then it should be very negotiation should be costless or zero or very less. That means we have to avoid transaction cost. So transaction cost is basically one of the major issues that we face while assigning the property right. So now we can try to understand Coasian solutions to negative production externalities with the help of the concept that we already introduced, like private marginal benefits, private marginal cost, social marginal cost, and social marginal benefits. So with externalities, the way in which we define and discuss externalities, here we can actually show that how Coase, with the help of Coase, that how private sector solution could be one of the suggestions that we can actually prescribe for the market or to tackle externality. So we can show this with the help of graphical illustration and with the help of various examples. So if we imagine the same example that we gave, that we have used to explain the externalities, is like say price of, say, imagine any product or any market, like steel here. Steel as a product, or say garment or clothes is a product, and then price of that particular commodity will be measured along with the vertical axis, and then quantity along with the horizontal axis. So it means like when we are talking about demand and supply, and then when producer is producing that industrial products, then externality comes when it impacts on the others, like it impacts on the well-being of the others. So in our case, the example that we had given is like impact of producing steel on the on the fishes community, because largest of the product is actually routed through the river, and river is getting polluted, and fishes communities are depending on the rivers for their livelihood, and therefore in this particular externality, which is negative externality out of the production activities, this is what the point where we'll try to understand how Coase try to give solution, right? So here we'll try to understand how Coase actually proposed. I'd also like to highlight here that in the production externalities, we can also imagine like construction of the new road or the example that I had given in my last lecture is like in the same shopping complex, there are two different multiple activities are happening, but then say one like coaching center, the owner of the coaching center is getting affected by the music station which is just next door of that particular shop. So it's basically in those situations that we are trying to understand course theory and course propositions. And it is also true that not every time it is possible to arrive at amicable solutions when two parties are involved. But here some sort of course propose that some sort of benefits that we should be giving both the parties, or let them come up with some sort of solutions which they can exercise through market. This is what we are trying to say. So now like say this is demand for say steel. So here demand, which is private marginal benefit, it is basically demand function, demand curve of the steel, and here the supply curve, which is private marginal cost curve. And private marginal cost curve is nothing, is basically firms, or here in this particular case whichever industry that we consider, is basically supply curve of that particular product. So they are intersecting at say point E, and at point E we get Q1 amount of quantity and then P1 amount of the price, that is at the market level it is getting kind of equilibrium. So at point E, when we consider at point E, then price OP1 and OQ1 quantity, so these are that we are getting it here, we are getting it under perfect competition, we write as PC. So this is what the first the first market conditions, like market efficiency. So E is definitely market efficiency, but then private market efficiency. So now imagine, like suppose we have given the rights, property rights. So that is what the core argument of the Coase theorem. We have given property right to the Fisher's community, and then Fisher's community, they are realizing that their production is getting hampered or getting adversely affected by the production of the steel or say garments, any example, I mean any industry that you choose. And then they are coming together, and then they came and then they try to negotiate as a collective. They came and then they discussed with the say industry is spokesperson, and then they are trying to find out some sort of amicable solutions. And then they are saying that per unit extra production that you are having it, so we as a Fisher community, we are getting affected at the rate of say $100 productions. So they are charging just $100 because that is the calculation that they have calculated. So that is the cost that they are demanding, that it should be compensated. And then industry or firm will immediately also try to understand that, okay, let us see how we can actually address this issue. Either we should stop, I mean as a firm should stop the production, but then firm realize that if they withdraw the entire production from the market, it will be huge loss. And firm, like owner of the steel factory or the industry, they decided, okay, we will try to compensate $100 that are coming as a compensation from the Fisher's community. So that is how they will sort of demand, and that's how this will be counted as say marginal sort of damage. So they will consider this cost that or compensation that are being demanded by the Fisher's community will be considered as marginal damage, and then marginal damage needs to be compensated, and that will shift their overall supply curve, because as a producers, they will also try to calculate the optimum level of production and the output. So what they will do, they will steel industry will have, or any product, I mean any product that you are imagining, they will have their different cost curve, which is the supply curve for them, like different marginal cost curve. So which will be regarded as you know, in the externality debate, is social marginal cost curve, which is nothing, is basically private marginal cost curve plus we are adding marginal damage, and marginal damage is basically the payment that needs to be compensated by the industry to the fishers community. So this gap is basically marginal, due to marginal damage, and we get the new equilibrium point, which is E1, and corresponding to this new equilibrium point, we get new level of quantity and we get new level of price level. So in this particular case, when that marginal damage will be paid as a compensation to the fishers community for the per unit, and that cost will be transferred to the product, and eventually it will also impact on the overall productions. So in this particular case, E was equilibrium point or efficiency point at the private level in the market. E1 is also equilibrium point, which we can refer as socially optimum. Why? Because MD is getting transferred from industry to the affected one, here the fishers community. So MD is going as payment, so it is not present as part of the profit, but then we get new quantity level, which is OQ2. So overall quantity will be reduced because farm is realizing that more and more they produce, more and more residues, which is sludges of the product, which has a potential to pollute the river, and of course that is a threat to the fishers community to derive their livelihood. So therefore they will reduce their production amicably, because they also have to be in the new equilibrium point where production can take place. But as a result, price will increase from OP1 to OP2. So OQ2 and we get OP2 at the new equilibrium point, which is at point E1. But then point E1, just like point E, both are equilibrium, but then E1 is socially optimum point. E is again market economic and market efficiency point. But then in this particular solution through the payment, because here property rights were granted to the fishers community, number one, property rights were very well defined, bargaining was very less, because fishers community, they are not charging huge amount or extra than whatever the loss amount. So if that negotiation space is given, property rights are well defined, then overall people and also the fishers community, they will also be happy, and then producers, they are also happy, because production, although production has reduced, it's like has reduced from OQ1 to OQ2, but at the same time price of the product has actually increased from OP1 to P2. So it is not like it is at the cost of producers. It is actually amicable solutions with the grant, with the property right grants, and with the very less or no bargaining or no transaction cost. So this is Coasian's solution to the negative production externalities, and this is what private solutions that we are leveling as. So now let's move further. Like let's talk about the summary of the Coase theorem. So here externalities what we learned from Coase theorem are externalities are a source of economic inefficiency, that we already know from the externality debate, but it can be corrected through market interventions, means through granting property rights and also low or zero transaction cost, so that market can have efficient point, like say market can move from E to E1, but then that is very amicable solutions in the market where property rights is actually completed and transaction costs are also very low, and these conditions are approximated by assigning again property rights and therefore creating a market for the externality. So it is basically at the private level, it's a private solutions as per the Coase theorem. Coase does not actually say about government interventions at this stage. If market can manage this, then externality can be tackled with the help of rights, property rights, and the negotiations, private negotiations between the parties, right? So this is like it is considered, of course, it is considered as very simple sort of propositions and the solutions for very complicated issue like externalities, and on this basis a lot of critique also had arrived, and then we'll also discuss like what are the problems that are associated with. So let us discuss with the what are the problems with Coase theorem that we can anticipate. The first is assignment problem. Like even if we consider say river, which community, maybe n number of communities or n number of groups, they are deriving their livelihood from the river, and river source and flowing that particular area is like really long. So this particular industry which is set up at say at one point, so how will they ensure like the compensation that they are giving to one particular community, that is basically resolving the solution, right? So that is what the one of the major problems. Even if you grant property right to the fishes community, how will you ensure that actually taking care of all the problems with the other communities as well? The second point is hold out problem. Like say when we say group, so when we are saying that fishes community, so it's a group of people, so and everybody has to agree upon about that the compensation amount as a fishes community that they will be getting it from industry. So how will we actually get it, or how will we ensure that all people who are involved in that fishing community, that everyone is actually agreeing? So how will we get sure that we get a signature or consent from all the parties? Like say if 10 people are involved or 100 people are involved, so even the one person, if he or she says or decline to sign or give consent, then entire process will be at halt. Or maybe the one person may say that he or she demands for high price, and then as the industry, when industry will see that all 99 people or 9 people out of 10 or 99 people out of 100 agreed and signed, but then entire process got stuck only for one person. So from industry's point of view, they will always try to find out other way to negotiate, and there again negotiation becomes expensive, or transaction cost will be expensive, and therefore possibility of illicit transaction like bribes and etc will be there. So that is the problem that actually is there with the Coase theorem, that propositions when we keep it on the sort of on the market and between the parties, and that problem is associated with the holdout problem. The third problem that that are associated with the Coase theorem, and I'll not explain much more in detail because we already know about what we understand about the free rider problem. Like maybe not everybody is getting affected, but then in the group very few either one can hold out the entire sort of exercise, or one or two people who are not getting affected, but since as a part of the group will get the benefit out of that from the compensation. So that is free rider problem in economics is always is there, and that is what economists they are worried about it. The fourth point, again we are saying that emphasizing, although transaction cost we are supposed to keep it very low, under or zero under Coase theorem, but then always it is there with the transaction cost always will be involved, and negotiation problem always will be there. So even we try to find out amicable efficient outcome. So these are four broad sort of issues that we get it in the transaction, with the Coase theorem. So assignment problem, holdout problems, free rider problem, transaction cost or negotiating problem. So all these four factors are economic factors, and therefore even if we talk about, say, any public policy, so public policy we can, especially in case of environment, and whether we take air pollutions, or whether we take water pollutions, how we actually tackle this. And this is where the problem that we always realize. For instance, in India, this is a debate that in North India that everywhere we face. It's like post Diwali there is the air pollutions. So firecrackers are actually produced by the industry, and it is not illicit products, but then that actually has create negative externalities to the entire cities or entire areas. So that has the cost. So who will bear this cost? But everybody wants to in health hazard point of view, they also need some sort of solutions. So how to address that particular issue? Or says stubble burning. So that is that exercise, and this is a policy level discussions. How to deal with this? Who will compensate? How at the private level between the parties, how it should be addressed? There are directives from the even government. We'll come back to that discussion, like how public sector solutions. But then even between the communities, between the parties, it is not amicable solutions. Or just imagine that we get disturbed with the passing the flights over the some residential areas. So who will negotiate? Who are getting getting affected due to this frequent flights over few places, like the houses or the residential areas which are close to airports, they are getting much more affected. So who will actually deal with this negative externalities? So here, even if you assign some sort of property rights or some sort of directives that 10 kilometers or 20 kilometers or 15 kilometers radius of the airport, there will not be many residential areas, but still even 25 kilometers and 35 kilometers immediate after that particular directives, people are getting affected by the sound. If somebody, like for instance elderly people, they are getting affected, or say children, they are getting affected. So who will compensate? So there is, it's not kind of perfect solutions, and always we face this kind of issues that are associated with the externalities. And even Coase theorem actually failed to explain this these nuances, which still we don't have much explanations. So so I'll stop here with the private solutions. So I have used again Stiglitz and Jonathan Gruber's book to explain negative externalities, and from Coase theorem's point of view, and how Coase actually is giving amicable solutions for that. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'll see you in my next class, where we'll talk about public sector solutions in the in production, negative production externalities, or positive production externalities. So thank you very much.